Today, new shifter knob, yay! And last night I slept pretty well. I didn't take any CBD cream because the night before I did, and it seemed to keep me in a sort of dreaming awake state. So I felt like I was sleeping, but I wasn't really, and I didn't feel fully asleep, and there was like dream stuff going on, but I was observing the dream stuff. So that was 2 nights ago, and I had to get up in the night and take some Zopiclone, I think. I might have taken a bit of Zopiclone, less than a quarter. I think I had to get up and take more, or I took some Benadryl or something. I don't know what I did, but now what I feel like I'm going to do is try the CBD cream when I'm awake during the day, because maybe it will augment dreaming awake, which is part of the mechanism of awakening and being really awake, is that the world that when we're awake becomes more dreamlike. It becomes more fluid. So I'm going to try that on a day where I'm not going anywhere. I don't want to do that if I'm driving, even if it's supposed to have very minimal effects. So I'm going to experiment with that. And yesterday was back to school, back to work for everybody. And I spent my day like this. I'm going to go to the dollar store and try to find one of these batteries for my fidget spinner. A little person came along and saw it in my room and pressed the button. I don't know if you can see that, but I had no idea that it lit up like this. So this year I'm starting to feel a little bit old when little people come in and just start figuring stuff out without even trying. They just already know. And I'm like, oh, I would have never thought to press this button. I didn't even think it was a button. But it's going to make it a lot cooler. And I also want to share that when I was home alone last week, I had a lot more calm breathing. Even though I didn't necessarily feel calm, I was breathing slower. So I think breathing slower, I don't know if it's relative that time is speeding up or what, but I think there's a certain breathing pattern for thought consciousness, and when one is surrounded by that, one has to sort of mirror the breathing pattern of that. And then when it's not there, the breathing is naturally calmer, even though I didn't necessarily feel subjectively calmer, but the objectivity of my body was calmer. The physiology was more calm. And maybe there's a calmness in the physiology when one is in a state of creativity and aloneness. I don't know. And I'll show the screen recording of that. The last 2 days, I earned over 10,000 sweat coin. So I upgraded, I think it was for 5 sweat coin, to be able to earn 10 a day, which is 10,000 steps. So yesterday I was testing it with rollerblading, and I did 30 kilometers on skates, and I did get over 10,000. And then they say, well, you're losing if you don't upgrade again. But I'm thinking that after today, I won't really be doing a ton of walking outside. So I wanted to have the opportunity to get over 5,000 steps and earn sweat coin, but I don't necessarily think I'll get over 10,000 enough to justify using that other bit. But Possibly, I don't know. So we'll see how it goes. It's a bit of an experiment. I've had a lot of insights lately that I've written down, and even driving. My brain cells are trying to figure out mechanisms of all of this. It was pretty interesting. When I was driving today, I was saying something about right now our brain is based mainly on pleasure, which is looking for evidence of our own projections. So our projections are creating that evidence, and it's not even really there. So we're earning something that's not there, or we're earning based on something that's not there, which is a projection of the self, and the self isn't there. We're just making certain very small limited aspects salient of the whole field of vision in order to get a boost of pleasure or dopamine or something. And that's like very pinhole and limited and precise. But then when our perception relaxes and we see the whole field, now instead of a pleasure-based brain, we're based on perception, a perception-based brain. And we're perceiving the actual moment and not our projections. And that's beautiful, and there's a richness there, and I don't think there's a possibility for the brain to get bored of that. I'm seeing a bit that part of the reason why we get thrust into chaos, like the self goes into chaos, it temporarily disintegrates, because the universe is pretty bored with the way we're living our lives. And yeah, a lot more that I've written, and I'm starting to feel like I'm making sense of it to a point where these might be helpful ideas to share. It's basically about being able to use our brain instead of our brains being used to project thought and move based on patterns. So the pattern projection is based on precognition or premeditation or motive, and that motive is installed in us. It's not there when we're born. So learning how to use our own brains for perception versus projection is a big part of it. I just got an email from the sweat coin people saying that my 44 sweat coin last week was in the top % of earners. So that gives me some kind of idea. I did do a lot of walking, and I probably won't be doing that much this week. And I stopped to change my car insurance because I'm working more this month and I'm underinsured for working that much. So the good thing about that was I got some sushi, a yam roll, from a sushi place in the same complex, and it was so delicious. I took it with me. I don't like eating sushi at the restaurant if I can help it, because I'm so messy. Don't know how to use chopsticks. I use my hands. So I took it with me, and then I felt hungry, so I stopped to eat it before I drove out this way. I'm just at the park because I'm facilitating today, and I'm looking forward to it. It's the first day of this workshop, and just sitting here. I don't have to be there for an hour, so I want to get myself in the facilitator heart set. I do like facilitating groups because it's kind of fun. And I wrote down the definition, my definition of the facilitator I want to be, that I created when I took different facilitation training online recently. Has nothing to do with what I'm facilitating today. And I wrote the definition, I energize the potential of learning, understanding, meaning making, and transforming in a helpful, compassionate, and empowering way. I am humble and approachable, and that makes possible healing, creativity, and a new way of living in a safe space. And I wrote those things down because some of those things I'm not, or I don't feel like I am. I don't feel like I'm super approachable. Some people are just so approachable, and I want to be that way. I want my energy to be that way. And I do want to facilitate people learning for themselves and learning how to facilitate that, which is not about telling people what to do. So I've done a lot of facilitating learning for myself over the last couple years, and hopefully I can bring that into this space, because I haven't facilitated this workshop in a long time. And the insurance agent was kind of cute too. That was a bonus. Last night I played Ultimate Frisbee, and it was so much fun. And last night I also had a bad dream that I could feel these hands grabbing me and cutting me. And I remember sort of realizing it's okay because I can go into the emptiness, and then also realizing it was not real, or it was a dream, so I wasn't afraid. So releasing the fear helped me to wake up. And today I realized, my brain's been seeing a lot, but I realized that what I've been talking about with myself about functioning without executive functioning could be similar to what Krishnamurti's saying about meditation being unpremeditated art. Premeditation comes from kind of the prefrontal cortex. It comes from that algorithm of deciding based on concepts, and perception is required for unpremeditated art. So how does one act without premeditation, without pre-planning? And I think that's part of what we need to learn to do, to undo the doer. Of course, it's used somewhat, the executive functioning, but I think I've said the same thing a million different ways, but and I have to share a little bit of my story in this workshop and talk about my journey in the last 7 years after having a diagnosis. And I realized too that the whole mechanism of the structure of being pathologized and being labeled bipolar after 5 minutes in front of a psychiatrist seems to me to be the brain going back to wanting to know right away what's going on, not being able to sit in the unknown. So a lot of times in so-called mania and psychosis, we're in this world of the unknown. And after a while, it's really hard to handle being in the unknown, especially when surrounded by the known. So the brain is okay with being in the unknown for a while, but eventually one's like, well, what's happening? What's happening to me? And then when we get captured by psychiatry, it's the brain wanting the immediate answer to that question. So psychiatry in a way fulfills our need to know right away what's happening, what's going on with me, what's happening to me. Am I going crazy? And they're kind of like, yep, you are. Here's your diagnosis. And then in a way it's sort of a relief, like, oh, okay, it's just mental illness. I don't have to be in the unknown anymore, be in a state of not knowing what the heck is happening from moment to moment. Because when we're in that state of the unknown, for the first time at least, we get into this space, we're in the unknown, but at the same time, the knowing part of the mind is making a story out of it. So it's trying to make associations, make connections, and say, well, I know what's happening. It's this story. It's this story about me. And eventually, as the moments go on and one is creating a bigger and better story, one starts to feel somewhat grandiose or special, and one starts to feel like, oh, I'm so grandiose and special, maybe somebody's watching me because it feels like I'm in the Truman Show or something. If somebody's not watching me, they should be, because this is entertaining. But it's really the universe being entertained by us. That's not the only factor. It's so complex, but the brain can start to learn how to remain in the unknown and be okay with it and not have to make some kind of coherent story out of it. One can't make a story for oneself. Maybe some kind of outsider objectively could put together a linear story, but I don't think the one living out in the unknown can do that. But we're in a dual state when we first go in there, and we're making a story like we usually make up stories in regular consciousness, but we're making a story about a self, but the trouble is there is no self there. It's an abstraction, it's a concept. So to make a big story and make something special out of something that's not even there, it's bound to implode. And when the story gets so big, it eventually collapses and turns into, well, if you thought you were a special self, now you're a mentally ill self for making yourself so special. And I also realized too that the sense of getting special messages is partly because one feels like a self again. So the sensation of getting a special message is that the message is special for me. But the trick of that is there is no me. The me is an accumulation of memories. So I can think of, I'm getting special messages, and that means there's this special story happening. It's not that there's nothing special or powerful going on, but the problem is in attributing it to the small self. So another way to look at it would be, if I'm seeing special messages I could see it as a text message from the universe. So if I see some kind of message that seems meaningful, I could see it as a text message from the universe. So if I think about getting a text message from a friend, any one of my friends, I could think, well, that makes me special that they sent me a message. But it could just mean that they're my friend. They're my friend and not making anything special about me out of the interaction, because in essence there is no self. And that's like a spiritual concept, if you want to say that, but it's not a concept, it's a truth. So when one lessens action based on the self, or premeditation, which is a function of the self, the executive functioning of the self, then one sees it as the brain making something salient. And what is the beauty and the awe-inspiring part is the power of the universe, especially when it starts to befriend us or show us that it's friendly and that we're part of that friendly universe. So it relates to Albert Einstein's question, is this a friendly universe? So getting special messages could mean this is a friendly universe. Not that I'm special. It could be the universe showing us that it's friendly, because a lot of times the projections of our thought show us that the universe is a fearful place. And so a message, they don't really feel as special when one realizes that there is no specialness in the self. Doesn't mean there's nothing meaningful. It means everything is meaningful, except the one thing that has no meaning, which is putting some kind of separate entity of self at the forefront. So then everything has meaning, and then in that way too, the sense of special messages declines too, because the whole field is so beautiful, and the universe might present certain things in awareness and in mind that are super beautiful, like a butterfly flying or an ant crawling, or certain pattern in the clouds, and that has nothing to do with me. But if one works to decrease the specialness of the self, then one can really be with the beauty of the universe. So the problem with mania sometimes is attributing the beauty of the universe to the concept of self and to that structure which builds executive functioning, and then that increases our sense of needing to do something. Oh, there's a beautiful wasp. Scram. Oh, and there is a butterfly way over there. So yeah, I've been seeing a lot, and I wrote down some stuff. I wrote down, I earn meaning, not money. My brain cells earn meaning in a way. They create it. They pay for it and they earn it. They pay with attention and earn meaning other than thought constructs like that. Butterfly down yonder. It's kind of flying closer. And this is something else I want to get into, but it will take some time to unfold. There's the butterfly. I don't know if I got it, but right on cue. I was thinking about how in chemistry and stuff, they arbitrarily assign particles to be either positively or negatively charged. Or like a magnet to have a north and south pole. And I'm wondering if that could be like the two aspects of reality are soma and significance, to borrow Dr. David Bohm's terminology, meaning soma, like physical, objective, and significance, like the meaning. So soma would be particle and significance would be wave. So everything is a particle, and it also has some kind of meaning that is subtle. And I don't know where I'm going to go with that exactly, but I'll talk about that more, because I'm pretty sure I already talked about the double-blind placebo thing. Double-blind placebo-controlled. And I wrote down, diagnosis is not game over, but game on. If you perceive something, you earn meaning, which is new, that you've never thought before. I can hear a very unique bird call. I don't know if I've ever heard it before. I was thinking about being one with the universe and bringing that energy into the group, and then that's when I started to hear that bird call. It's sort of like my favorite one I heard in that other park, the one that goes wee wee wee. But this one is different. I've never heard it before, and I wonder who even has ears to hear it. Who even thinks it matters to listen? And if we don't listen, does it exist? It doesn't exist within the field of human consciousness. Then we don't even notice what we're destroying. I hear you, birdies. Lately, I've been getting to sleep earlier and getting up earlier. And I'm finding by doing that, I'm more tired when I do go to sleep at night. So I think that's good. I'm going to keep trying to get to sleep before 10. Last night, I got some sushi for dinner and then just stared at Downton Abbey for like hours. Kind of looking forward to be finished the whole series again, so then I won't keep watching it. But I really like that show. And I still have had a bit of a stomach issue this last week, so taking some oil of oregano. And I like to put it in a capsule, an empty capsule, because it's pretty nasty stuff. It's pretty hard to swallow. So I just put 5 drops in here. Close the cap. It's only like that much. That way it doesn't get all in my mouth. Kind of burns. It's doable, but swallow with liquid. Well, I prefer to put it in an empty cap. And today, I'm not really going anywhere, so I'm going to try the CBD cream during the day. See what it does. I put it in this thing because it was separating out in the other jar that it was in. It doesn't seem to really separate in this. It's not too bad. It was just separating out in that pump. So this is transdermal cream, which is to be used on the back of the hairline here. So I'm just going to take some. So apparently there's a bunch of sort of open nerve endings here. I don't know exactly what the right term is for them. I'd have to look it up and do some research. My friend who created this stuff, he has done a bunch of research and he did send me the paper on this. There's even an acronym for this back of hairline at the back of the skull area here, but I don't know what it is. I feel like mostly right now it's going in my hair, so I gotta give it a good rub in because it's supposed to be transdermal, so going through the skin, and if it's all in my hair, it's not really gonna do that. So I'm not sure how much this stuff helps me at night. I feel like it was making me still do the dream awake thing. And since I talked to myself about sometimes it feels like we go into a dream awake while awake, why not use this stuff while awake? See if it creates more dream awake or insight or perception or less perception. I have no idea. So I may as well use quite a bit. This seems like a lot. Actually, I put a little bit right here too. Why not? Because I've watched videos online where people talk about cleansing the pineal gland and they stick like turmeric or turmeric, however you want to call it, on their third eye and they do all this stuff to cleanse it out. I also have haritaki powder, which is supposed to do that too, which is taken in, well, it's a powder form. I put it in a cap because I used to take the powder in a glass and it made me throw up. So, putting lots of this cream on. Gets it right in my brain, I guess. And I'm not sure where else I could put it because I have a little bit left here. Yeah, maybe I'll just put it here. So yeah, that's quite a bit of it. And it's just a daytime experiment instead of a nighttime one, since I really don't think it helps me sleep. What's helping me right now is taking the quarter Zopicone and 150 milligrams trazodone and 50 milligrams of quetiapine, along with taurine and glycine and zinc and sunflower lecithin. So those are some things I'm taking for sleep, and I'm going to keep taking that sort of thing until I go to California, because I need to keep sleeping well until I go. So yeah, I'm also drinking some ginger tea because of my stomach. It's a little bothersome. Yeah, I don't fully feel like talking to myself today, but I feel like I might get into writing a bit more. I'm trying to sell my old car today, and I just tried to start it and it wouldn't start. So I'm gonna have to troubleshoot that, because somebody's coming to see it in about 6 hours. And tomorrow I facilitate, and I also see my doctor, and I see my GP now for mental health, and I want to ask her for more Zopiclone and not more Nazanan, because it didn't work, and see if she'll give it to me, as well as 3 months prescription to last me when I'm in California and I have extra medication. Plus, I don't think I'll have to take as much for that long when I go down there. So just increasing my stash so I can self-direct what I want to take and when I want to take it, and move with the ups and downs and the flow of whatever this is all about. Let's see if I have anything to talk about. What I want to talk about now is, I think I want to start to write something about what I've been talking about with myself. And I think the part that I want to write about is this possibility of operating without a self, which I feel the self is really tied into executive function as we typically know it and think about it. And I feel it's possible that we can learn to function without that and eliminate a lot of the problems that the self structure brings up. And especially for people who have that part of functioning break down and they're called mentally ill. So I remember reading something recently or a while ago on how a lot of the problem with somebody who is diagnosed with schizophrenia, for example, is that they lose cognitive functioning. I think I talked about it before, and their cognitive functioning goes down to like the bottom 5% of the population, or bottom 1%. Something really, really low. And so I feel that the fact that diminishes so markedly in people that get diagnosed with schizophrenia and maybe bipolar sometimes too. They're doing things right now like cognitive remediation. They're trying to make that a major part of recovery because of the fact that cognition goes down so low. People really have trouble functioning. People have trouble doing activities of daily living, like their laundry and things like that. But I feel like it's possible to go a different way and use a different part of the brain for those same functions. So the same part of the brain, the same functions like doing laundry or doing whatever, a different part of the brain could be used. And in that way, the person might not be at risk as much in losing those functions. Or if one learns to function with both, executive functioning as we know it as part of mainly the prefrontal cortex, plus this other type of functioning, then a person would be doubly protected. And so this is especially for people who lose that executive functioning, which I think is tied into the self. And I think one of the reasons why this happens to people is because of the illusion of self and the falsity of it and so many different things. But the fact of the matter is that it does decline in so many people who get diagnosed with a so-called mental illness, to the point where they're thinking that it's more cognitive now than even emotional, for example. And I don't know that for sure, but another part that's missing in doing something like cognitive remediation, which could really help people, I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's so meaningless, the activities they put forth, that they pretty much have to convince people to do them. Like, say, this is going to help you get a job, or this is going to help you blah, blah, blah. It's like really trying to coerce somebody into doing that. And it doesn't seem that interesting. So the other part of it, I think, is that I don't know what I was going to say with that at all. I forget. Maybe the CBD cream is kicking in. So I might leave the rest of this part for later, but see if it comes back to my mind what I was going to say about that. Well, something else for sure. I remember before I started talking to myself, when a crisis was about to hit for me, I'd be doing something on the computer and I'd have a really hard time, like, finding a list of emails or creating a list of people's emails out of different emails or something, like if I had to do that for work. I literally couldn't remember and I couldn't do it. And then I felt like I couldn't see was the thing. I felt like I was sort of zoomed in and I couldn't see what was right in front of me. Like it became this big blind spot. And I feel like when that happens, it's really challenging for someone to, for me, it was hard to do these complex tasks on the computer and things, but now that hasn't happened to me so much, because I feel like now when my brain zooms in like that and I feel like I can't see, I'm still able to function and get my laundry done and shop for food and things like that, because I've learned how to do that without that other stuff happening. It's hard to explain, but I do want to try to write about this, because something I was going to say is that this is especially for people who get labeled with a mental illness and have cognitive decline because of that. And then it could also expand to the larger population, because if people can learn how to function without the executive function, then when that starts to disappear or the self structure dissolves, then one has something to fall back on. One knows how to operate without it, because not everything is tied into the self and its executive functioning, like planning. So the difference would be a little bit that one can plan to go get a coffee, or one can wake up in the morning, realize that one wants a coffee and go get it. So there's no planning. It's waiting for that impulse to arise in the moment. So like, whereas a lot of stuff that we do, we plan like, oh, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. And it's that movement of planning, that sort of treadmill that we go by in order to, that's moving at the same time that we're actually doing it, and we're doing something different while we're planning the next thing. So this would be not planning anything, having that impulse to get coffee in the morning, and then going to get it, and not planning, well, now I'm going to do that, and then that and that, because then the planning movement is tied in with the doing of other things. And I think when that planning and executive functioning breaks down, we lose our ability to do other things. It's like we can only do things out of habit, And the habits are what are moving us. And then while we're planning something else, we're moving habitually. And so when we lose that sort of structure that isn't even congruent because we're not fully present when we're doing something, then we can't do anything. So learning to be fully present while doing something and not thinking about the next, not having the self going while doing something actually. We can learn to do things actually without the self going. And I think that's what could be really important, because then our self is tied in with everything that we do, and we don't really need it as much as we think we do. I might try to do an experiment. Well, I kind of did it through the summer a bit, that I didn't really plan anything. I just got up and went and just drove, and I'm hungry, I'll stop here. So that could have been partly that. So it could be important sometimes to do that, to do a bunch of stuff without planning. And I don't know if planning's the right, like the precognition, the premeditation, doing things without premeditation. Because part of what the self is that premeditative structure. Planning to say this and planning to do that. We plan out what we're going to say. I don't really know what that's like anymore, because I don't have any kind of conceptual planning of what I'm going to say before I say it, ever. But I do remember that before. So we don't even know that we can act without planning things. So the self, which is part of the planner, that's what gets destroyed, and then we don't know how to be without that planner, that conceptualization. We've been living our whole life as a concept and not as an actuality. So that's part of what breaks down in people who lose cognition through a mental health diagnosis, is that that conceptualization of living as a self and functioning through a self, which is all part of executive functioning and premeditation, is gone. We don't know how to act without that. So this unpremeditated art that Krishnamurti talks about, that's really important for us all to learn, because I think that would be a big solution to a lot of the brain problems that we're seeing now. So yeah, like the brain right now is used mainly as a recording and projecting device. So when the capacity to record or project, which is part of conceptualization, and projecting ourself into like a concept into the actuality, when the brain stops being able to do that because the brain cells that contain the memories break down, we don't know how to do anything. But that doesn't necessarily have to be so. We can learn to live by perception action. We can stop the brain from recording and projecting before it stops being able to do that through breakdown, through old age and things like that. So this actually, I feel, is a reversal of so much of what we take for granted of how we communicate, like based on stories and what happened and stuff like that. We would still be able to do that, but it wouldn't be the main way that we communicate. It would come up in context, but it wouldn't be the way that we generally communicate. We would communicate more for cooperation and co-creation than to reminisce on the past. Like it's all part of how we make the past so important, and we make the past we make it so, the past has something to do with the present moment, when that's not necessarily true. And so a lot of these things that I've realized over the years are, I think, part of Krishnamurti's teachings. And so maybe I'll work on comparing some of these things to some of these experiences, and when we can understand them in a different way, perhaps they're not pathology, but the path, which is a pathless path of not projecting a self-concept into reality. And it could get projected into reality, but we're not having that happen all the time, and we're not even the ones that choose when that happens. And it could be partly invisible to us as well. And yeah, and one of the things I think it has to do with is not having a theory of mind. So anyway, I'm gonna sign off for now. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more later if I feel all weird on the CBD cream. But for now, I will move on to something else.